Today we're making wonton noodle soup from scratch, wonton wrappers and all. This soup is absolutely incredible, but a heads up that this was a bit of a project. Completely worth it though.
Yeah, it's so worth it. It's the noodle you would get. You would get when you're a kid. You go to the great wonton places, you get the proper noodles. The traditional style.
So this ain't a basic soup. The ingredients for this stock are shrimp heads, some thoroughly rinsed pork bones with a little meat on them, soybean sprouts, and dried flounder or stockfish. To prep the dried fish, grill the fish over a medium flame till it's slightly blistered. We're going to be grilling a total of 4 dried fish here. 2 are going to go in the soup and we'll set aside 2 for later. Dump these ingredients: the pork bones, the dried fish, the shrimp heads, and the bean sprouts into 3 liters of cold water, and bring that up to a boil. Once it's boiling, just like pho or good Western stock, skim the bubbly scum off the top. These are proteins that'll cloud the stock, and a good wonton soup should be pretty clear. Now lower the heat to the lowest it'll go and let that simmer uncovered for 3 hours. For our wonton wrappers, we wanted to show you how to make them from scratch. Now, unlike, say, dumpling wrappers, the store-bought wonton wrappers on the left are actually pretty usable. But even if you source some nice ones, I think the quality difference here is still pretty damn noticeable. To start the wrapping, sift 250 grams of flour into a mixing bowl. Making that classic little pasta well, toss in 3/8 of a teaspoon of baking soda. Add a tablespoon and a half of water, 2½ eggs, and we're ready to knead. We're kneading this using a stand mixer with the hook attachment. Let that go on speed 1 for 8 minutes. This is a pretty dry dough, so after 8 minutes, this is the consistency we're looking for. Cover the dough with damp paper towel as you're working. Grab about 1/4 of the dough and roll it out a bit to get it started. Now roll that dough through a pasta maker on the largest setting. Fold the sides into the dough, first widthwise, then lengthwise. Roll it a touch to get a little of the crease out, and then again into the pasta maker. We gotta do this a grand total of 6 times to let that gluten develop. Going about 1/3 of that sheet at a time now. Put this through the pasta maker at a medium setting. This is to help ensure that the dough won't break when we finally put it in at the thinnest it can go. Cut that now super thin sheet into about 2½-inch wonton-sized squares. And don't forget to flour them to prevent sticking. You don't want to go through all this work just to get a big gloopy pile of unusable wrappers. Now this is wonton noodle soup, so we're going to be taking 1/4 of our original dough and turning it into noodles. Doing the exact same process as before, super thin, but this time we put it through and cut it into noodles. Ideally yours will be a little narrower, but this is the only noodle setting that we got on this machine. But now we got some homemade egg noodles. Setting those aside, we'll start the filling. Our filling is the classic mix of 70-30 pork hind and an equal part shrimp. As we always do with meat mixtures, first get that fat into a nice dice, something like this, and then roughly chop the shrimp. Toss those together and marinate with 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. The lean we mince by hand. First cut them into rough chunks, and then just start chopping, periodically folding the pork over itself to get a nice even mince. After about 10 minutes, this is what our pork's looking like, something more resembling a paste. And now for the most fun step in any meat filling recipe, dotting the meat. Slam that meat onto the counter to help develop a nice springy texture. Now we usually do this using our hands on this channel, but here Steph's showing an alternative dot technique of slamming via wildly swinging around cleavers. After 40 times of this, the meat mixture should have some nice stickiness like this. Another important ingredient for the filling here is dried shrimp powder. Dead easy to make. Just toss some dried shrimp into a blender and blitz. Then do the same thing with those 2 extra grilled and dried fish from before to get some dried fish powder. Combine the lean with the shrimp and fat. Then toss in a tablespoon each of those dried shrimp and fish powders we just made. Seasoning, we got 3/4 of a tablespoon chicken bouillon with a half tablespoon white pepper powder. Toss in a half a whisked egg and give that a nice mix. Dot a couple times for good measure, and we are ready to wrap some wontons. Now, wrapping wontons is sort of like dumpling making on easy mode. Even an oaf like me can do it. What you do is you put about a teaspoon or two of filling inside, press down with your thumb, then bring 2 corners together. Then take the other 2 corners and fold it to the top of the wonton and press. Continue working through all your wontons. Grab a chair for your exhausted girlfriend, and this was our yield. We won't need all of these, but don't worry, the extras freeze real well. So that simmering stock should be about done by this point, so strain, being real sure that you get every last drop. Ideally, the stock should be a touch clearer than this, but such is life, we were a bit busy multitasking with the filming. Season that stock with some rock sugar, a 1/4 teaspoon MSG, and 2 teaspoons of salt. Bring to a boil, taste the soup to make sure it's salty enough, and we are almost ready to assemble. Start bringing some water to a heavy boil, and as that's heating, we'll put our bowls together. Here we got some cut jiuhuang. These are leek sprouts. They got a great flavor, but you can sub scallion if you can't find any. We'll also be adding a 1/4 teaspoon of that dried fish powder and about the same amount of dried shrimp eggs. If you can't source the dried shrimp eggs, the shrimp powder from before will do just fine. Add in an 1/8 teaspoon of sesame oil and the same amount of soy sauce. Ladle in your hot soup, leaving some room for wontons and noodles. Now boil your wontons for about a minute until they're floating. Once they float, leave them in for 15 more seconds or so to cook completely, then add to the soup. Lastly, cook those noodles. Fresh noodles cook super fast, so a quick 20 seconds should be enough. Toss them in an ice bath or under running water to stop the cooking process. Then nestle the noodles into the soup. And your from-scratch wonton soup is done, just like you'd get from an old eatery in Guangzhou. And while this might seem like a lot of work for a bowl of noodles, this recipe will yield you a huge batch and everything freezes real well. So you can enjoy some authentic wonton noodles over the weeks to come. As always, for a detailed written recipe, check out the link with the Reddit post in the description. Subscribe for more Chinese cooking videos and leave us a note with any questions or requests.